We'll just go from there. We'll have some questions here pretty soon.
So again, I'm Scott Gilley, so president of the American E-Liquid Manufacturing Standards Association, AMSA. I'm the president of the Ohio Vaper Trade Association, which fights for our rights here in the state. I'm also on the board for the Right to Be Smoke-Free Coalition, which you might have heard the R2B and the Nickel Pure lawsuit was recently merged in DC court. So that's the litigation we have suing the FDA and what they're trying to do to it. I actually was just in Oklahoma.
Well, thank you for helping me quit.
Well, thank you. I hope you're still using it.
Been a little bit.
So I just got back from the OKC Vape Jam in Oklahoma, and that was 3 days of advocacy panels, advocacy sessions, talking to business owners about the regs. There's a lot of questions, and I'll take questions at some point. Maybe after, because I'm sure we all have questions. But you know, Don was at the premiere of the Billion Lives, the North American premiere in Milwaukee 2 weekends ago.
Yep.
If you haven't had a chance to see that, definitely make sure that's on your agenda when it comes.
We're going to get this theater you already started out.
Yeah, we're working on Columbus, getting a big thing. The Ohio Palace is 2,700 seats. It's going to be tough to fill 2,700 seats, but we're going to try to do that. But the movie's not for vapors. It's showing everybody really what the regulatory agencies, the FDA, and the big pharmaceutical companies are really doing to us, and really what the FDA regulations are really protecting big pharmaceuticals' interests. Everybody likes to demagogue big tobacco. Big tobacco, oddly enough, is on our side because these regulations hit them too. So are we all vapors in here, or any cigar store owners?
There was going to be a few, but they said they'd be here. But
So the vaping regulations, it's just not about vaping, right? It's about there's a hookah, shisha place 2 doors down. It affects them. Their products have never been regulated. Premium cigars have never been regulated. The Tobacco Control Act passed in 2009 specifically only targeted cigarettes, roll your own tobacco, and smokeless products like dip and chew and stuff like that. Does everybody remember when there were roll your own shops everywhere, right? And all of a sudden, they all disappeared. Well, it's because roll your own tobacco got lumped in with cigarettes and all those other things with the Tobacco Control Act. That's essentially what we're looking at here. One day there were roll your own shops, the next day there weren't any. And the reason for that is because the roll your own shops became tobacco manufacturers, right? So this sounds familiar. So, you know, are you guys just vapors? Is anybody any business owners here? Retail store owners, manufacturers?
Juice manufacturer there,
Juice
and on-spot chamber,
Juice, so retail store, you know, if you make clothes in your store?
Are you here for the meeting?
So, if you make coils in your store, you're considered a manufacturer. If you mix in your store, you're considered a manufacturer. If you have a big manufacturing facility, you're a manufacturer. So the roll your own tobacco stores went out because they could not comply with the Tobacco Control Act. The same thing that we're looking at. That's right. It's the same problem for manufacturers of e-liquid, manufacturers of coil. For FDA purposes, the finished tobacco product is considered like a coil 5-pack, like an Aspire coil or a Freemax or whatever pre-built coil it is. That 5-pack is considered the finished tobacco product. If you change that 5-pack, if you sell 4, 3, 2, 1, you are considering, in the FDA's eyes, you are considered to be modifying a finished tobacco product, which makes you a manufacturer. So there's all these crazy rules. The only difference between us and Roll Your Own Tobacco is we have 2 years to try to figure out what we're going to do. They didn't. But at the end of the day, more likely than not, right now, the FDA is going to do to us exactly what they did to Roll Your Own Tobacco. So what we need is, so nothing is going to change from within the FDA. The FDA doesn't care about you, a former smoker. They don't care about your business. They don't care about e-liquid manufacturers. They don't care. They don't care about any of us. They don't care you were former smokers. They don't care that I smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day in 2009 before I switched to e-cigs. They don't care. They don't care that these retail store owners employ, across the country, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people between e-liquid manufacturers, retail stores, whatever the case may be. They don't care. They don't care. So that's the first thing that we need to get through our heads is, well, how can they do this? Well, they can do it because they can, right? They're a regulatory agency. It's very powerful, and what they want is more power. So how can they do it? Why don't they care? How can they do this? They're going to drive people back to smoking. They don't care. And in their mind, it might be easier to drive people back to smoking because that's regulated by them already, and they can control that. The pharmaceuticals companies certainly would like to see that happen because the pharmaceutical companies are interested in treating your illness. They're interested in treating tobacco-related diseases, health effects.
Treatment, not cure.
They're interested in the treatment, not the cure. Now, there's caveats to that. Chemotherapy is hopefully a cure, but that's an extreme case. For the most part, they want you to continue smoking so that they can continue selling you drugs to treat your tobacco harm, your tobacco-related diseases. They want you to keep trying their nicotine cessation products that have a 5 to 8% success rate, or another way of saying that would be a 92 to 95% failure rate. They want you to continue doing that to the tune of, I forget the number, $8 billion a year, which I believe is the size of the NRT
Tobacco
market.
supposedly lost $2 billion to the vaping industry last year. I don't know what the numbers are for pharmaceutical, but it's up there.
But if you look at Chantix, right, there was a court case where somebody actually got off. He got off murder because he made it. He said, "Well, I was on Chantix, and Chantix made me murder that person." And I've known people that have been on Chantix, and they've had to have gone off because they were either homicidal or suicidal. Chantix is a terrible form of drug. But Chantix was fast-tracked through the FDA approval process because the pharmaceutical company said this is to keep people from, or this is a smoking cessation product. And if you mention that in the FDA, there's all kinds of fast tracks you can go around. The normal pharmaceutical is 7 to 10 years to run through the FDA approval process. Chantix went through, and I think two or three. I'm not sure exactly, but they got fast track. They didn't have to answer to all of the side effects.
It doesn't.
So what do we do? The short answer to what we do is the FDA is not going to change. Okay. So if petitioning the FDA, all of that stuff, it's not going to change their mind. Again, they don't care. The fix is going to come between litigation and legislation. Litigation being suing the FDA, legislation being changing the predicate date. Like we've all heard about that, the Cole-Bishop Amendment, which is an amendment to the Agricultural Appropriations Bill, how the Department of Agriculture gets their money from the government. The HR 2058 is a standalone bill that Tom Cole from Oklahoma sponsored. I've met him in his home office out there. Good guy, and he likes it, but unfortunately there's not a lot of support for the Cole bill right now because the Cole amendment hopefully is being bipartisan. Hopefully it will change. Duncan Hunter from California is going to be having some legislation. Hopefully we should see that, and that's kind of AMSA sponsored. I don't know if that's the word.
You were instrumental to help write that bill, weren't you?
I did help craft the bill, tweak the bill, so it does what it needs to do. Now, obviously, the House Legislative Council actually writes the bill, but it was, what challenges do you face and how can we, overcome those and so forth. So look for that next week, I think, is when it's scheduled to come out.
And explain what that does, why it's different than the Cole bill. The Cole bill changes the date.
So the Cole bill, the Cole-Bishop Amendment, they changed the predicate date, the grandfather date, the February 17th, 2000 date, the 2007, sorry. So in the Tobacco Control Act that was passed in 2009, the grandfather date was established then. So anything on the market prior to that date in 2007 could remain on the market unchanged, not have to go through any sort of tests, not, really all they limited was they locked the market, they froze the market. That's exactly what happened on August 8th. On August 8th, the market was froze. No new products, no new ends products or newly deemed products, whether they be cigars or shisha or a water pipe, or it's a bad word for them, let me use a hookah. A hookah for shisha, for I guess it's called just smoking a hookah, right? Yeah. So a hookah pipe uses shisha tobacco. No new products under that category can come into the market now after August 8th without going through the pre-market approval process, which is impossible. It's impossible. Nobody. It doesn't matter if you're big tobacco. Nobody can go through the PMTA process for these products. The only company that has successfully navigated PMTA was Swedish Match and their snus product. I don't know if you like that. You guys got Speedways up here, right? I'm from Maine.
Yeah, Speedways. I haven't seen snus, but I haven't looked for it.
Well, it's called General Snus, right? The tobacco companies have their own snus, but the Swedish Match is General Snus. Usually has it in the car, but it's the difference between snus and dip being dip is fermented, snus is pasteurized, so it's a completely different method. And again, this is a reduced tobacco harm product. The snus is looking to be, just like e-cigarettes, maybe 5% as harmful as cigarettes. So again, when we talk about tobacco harm reduction, snus dip even is better than smoking. Sorry.
Didn't Camel do that?
Yeah, Camel and Philip Morris have their own snus, and it's terrible. It's not actually snus. It's not actually snus. It's more of a dip type product. Their snus you shouldn't swallow.
No,
but
you should
Swedish snus, you swallow it.
Snus you swallow because it's pasteurized. Dip you spit because it's fermented. You don't want that.
Yeah, it's pure. It's purer, put it that way. So again, the August 8th date. So nothing can come on the market, whether it's an e-liquid, whether it's a device, a coil. That effectively is our lock-in date, but it's not the permanent lock-in date. It's the lock-in date for 2 years. So the PMTA process, that's where I was. Sorry, I'm kind of digressing. So Swedish Match was the only company to go through the PMTA process, and it was 4 years and $7 million to get their products through. So the only product that successfully navigated PMTA took 4 years. They're giving vapor products too. It's impossible. So part of the reason why it takes so long and why it's impossible is essentially we have to prove a negative. Okay, we have to prove if you want your product to improve, you have to prove to the FDA a number of things, such as how likely is it for a non-smoker to start using the product? How likely is it for a former smoker to go back to smoking? How likely is it for youth to initiate tobacco smoking because they tried these products first, like the gateway effect? There's all of these things that you can't prove. How are you supposed to show a regulatory agency the likelihood that a non-smoker is going to use your product? How do you do that without making them a smoker? And if you make them a smoker, your clinical trial will never have a chance of getting approved, because you're taking somebody that is not associated with a harmful habit or a harmful addiction, and potentially you have to make it would never pass. I forget what the term is, but there's a term in medical studies where essentially if you're going to harm the participants, it's completely just outright banned. Add to that, trying to find a place that does clinical studies that will accept a nicotine or a tobacco product study is becoming increasingly more difficult to find, again, because they don't want to expose their subjects to potentially harmful activity. So just to find a place and to get the requisite science and everything submitted, and let's say you've done all that, and it's 18 months from now. You got 6 months from the deadline, which is August 8th of 2018, right? That's when a PMT has to be filed with the FDA. So you've done that science, you've done your non-product specific science, you've done your product specific science, you've shown or you've demonstrated, hopefully you think you have, that your e-liquid in this range of devices at this range of powers or this range of voltages using this range of atomizers and different combinations and all of this, you shove it off to the FDA, and the FDA just says no. It's not sufficient to them. There's no checkbox. There's no complete this, complete this, complete this, complete this. It's completely subjective. So subjectivity. It's up for a complete subjectivity on FDA's part. If they don't like what they're looking at, That's it. You're done. And once you're done, your product has to be pulled from the market, it's still on the market, which means, you know, in the case of Nickwood, not only can we not manufacture anymore, we have to call every wholesale account, refund those products, take them back, completely remove them from the market, and then basically sit on your hands and hopefully adjust what you need to adjust based upon what their feedback is. Hopefully they've given you sufficient feedback. It's generally going to be vague and just general. And make the changes, do some more studies. Maybe in a couple more years you can submit another PMTA. Maybe in a couple more years you can submit a PMTA. So obviously this process is not going to work. It effectively is worst case scenario. The only way it would be worse is on August 8th, flavors were available, which almost happened. The FDA almost did that. So that's the only way it could be worse. So this is worst case scenario. So the answer is not the FDA. The answer is not trying to get them to change their ways. So it comes down to litigation. Litigation isn't a long-term strategy. Litigation is part of the process. It's part of building this give us time for legislation. Legislation ultimately is the final solution. So the litigation hopefully will put the brakes on everything until legislation has a chance to pass through Congress, get signed by the president, and become law. And that's why we need people like Don, right? We need allies in Congress. We don't have a lot of allies right now. We've got, you know, in the House of Representatives, we have Cole, we have maybe Bishop, since he's on the Cole Bishop Amendment. Maybe Bishop, but I don't have that confirmed, but we have Cole, maybe Bishop, Duncan Hunter, and there's a couple other names. But not even everybody who signed up to HR 2058 is necessarily an ally, right? They just got to receive enough mail to say, yeah, I'll co-sponsor this, whatever it says, whatever it's done. I just try to get my office to stop receiving so much mail. We also need friends in the Senate, and we have a few friends in the Senate. We have Ron Johnson. I just want to say Don.
Mitch McConnell's from Wisconsin.
Ron Johnson, Wisconsin.
Didn't his thing just get shut down today?
What, Mitch McConnell?
Ron Johnson's.
What?
Something came across.
Yeah, Ron Johnson, he just got shut down today by the FDA.
What did?
Something that he put into.
No, we wrote 3 letters to them asking, what?
They're not responding. They're saying,
right.
no.
So, but
whatever you want, we're not doing it.
But Ron Johnson he's in a unique situation because he's the chairman of the Department of Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. That committee has oversight of the FDA, which is why he's been writing letters to the FDA. And the general thinking is you write 3 letters, let them respond if they do respond, and if they don't respond or they don't respond enough to satisfy the request, he can hold a committee hearing. He can bring the FDA into the room and make them answer the questions. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, because that's what their thing is. He was requesting what they're deeming is
And
what
they're
the
saying,
regulations. And they said,
no, we're not giving you
we're not
the
giving you
information.
anything.
Well,
We're not giving you
they
the
have to
information to
eventually.
request.
Yeah, eventually, yeah, that's, so maybe
but
that'll
it's
take the
going to
next
take
step.
dragging them into a committee hearing.
Right.
You got to think we're running out of time. This is it's a lame duck election, which means I think Congress is back in session September 7th. I think it's around the 7th, and then they're only back for a couple weeks before they have another break, and they may or may not come back from that break. They may say, "Now we're going to go off an election. We don't really have anything on the schedule. We're just not going to start up session again until the beginning of the year." So time is running out. But certainly dragging the FDA in front of that committee and having a public committee hearing where we can have some proponents speak and be heard would be good. But the point still is we need allies. We don't have a lot of allies. So this is where I'll turn it over to Ron. Ron is Don.
Ron's a senator. It's a step up the food chain. I like how you're thinking, but it's a step up the food chain.
So Don is an ally that we have, and right now it's just about trying to get him in office. And if we can get him in office, then hopefully he'll fight for us.
Okay, nice one. All right, I begged Mike to make sure we got Scott here. because at this point, he really is the subject matter expert. I'm new to the issue here. Mike started talking to me maybe a week, 2 weeks before we headed to Milwaukee for the movie. And I was only beginning to get the first grasp of it. It wasn't until I got to Milwaukee, and even seeing the movie. I mean, go see the movies, guys. It's impressive and everything, but it's a movie, right? You know, you always take something in a movie with a big grain of salt. However, they sold 1,400 tickets for the movie. The theater was packed. So, did I speak to 1,400 people? No, but I spoke to hundreds that night, for sure. In the pre-party, you know, by the way, the movie started late. There was a break in it. We had a power failure of some kind. No, the alarm went off for the fire.
I like the power failure.
So that we were arguing there was a conspiracy theory. There was an FDA guy there trying to shut the whole thing down and get everybody out of Milwaukee. And in fact, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the riots were actually just misscheduled. They had really meant for the riot to be during the movie theater to get everybody totally out of town. And then going to the after parties afterwards, I got to speak to people, and they were able to say everything that you guys are not allowed to say in the shop. That, hey, I was a 2-pack-a-day smoker. You know? In fact, I was telling, I'm sorry, I forgot your name already. Josh, I was telling Josh that I was standing with this guy who was fairly heavy set. So again, I was a 2-pack-a-day smoker. I've been vaping for the 2 years. And food tastes good to me now, and he starts rubbing his ever-expanding belly. That guy was big, he was smiling, he was healthy, food tastes good to him, he was eating. He flat out says it changed his life. At the pre-meeting where Senator Johnson was at, there was a gal there who said she was a smoker for 23 years. And she swore that if these things are illegal, she's going to the black market, and she doesn't care what she has to do to get hold of her vaping products. She's not going back to cigarettes. She'll do whatever it takes to get hold of vaping stuff. She'll break the law to do it. That's pretty hardcore because, and it's not that she's so wrapped up on vaping. It's that it totally restored her life, and she's off of the cigarettes, and she's scared about going back. So that's pretty formative for me. So I'm a big believer here. A little more background on me real quick. I'm a small business guy. A lot of time in the software space, business process re-engineering. But most of my customers are what you're accused of being, which is manufacturers. I've got little manufacturers, paint shops, lawn and garden joints with trucks running around town, guys with 15, 20, 30 employees who are working hard every day to make a living and constantly have the government on their back. There's a powder coating company I do a lot of work with. I was in their office one day when the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District walked in. No, wrong place. And told them that they had taken water samples from the sewer outside and found too high of a level of zinc in the discharge, and they were convinced it was their fault and they needed to close for the day. Kaboom! So I've seen this sort of behavior happen from the government in other spots, and it really sickens me. Related very specifically to what we need to do. Scott laid out how you need a judicial piece here. We've got to freeze this clock and get more time to be able to solve the problem. Second, we need a legislation piece. But on the rollback of legislation, there's another piece to this personally, a very closely related issue. And instead of the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, it's the Highway Safety Act of 1984 that pisses me off. I've got one daughter in the Army, and I got one daughter in the Marine Corps, and they've got nice, beautiful green military ID cards. And guess what? They can't buy. Somebody help me, come on.
Vape product?
Vape product. They can still do that, but you got it.
Alcohol.
It's the alcohol thing. So I have actually been talking about the need to roll back the Highway Safety Act of 1984, particularly for people with green military ID cards. It's the same sort of overreach that the federal government does. So this really drives me up the wall. I really believe that the government's out to kill you guys, and that the target's going to move. Today, it's firmly on the vaping industry. I was in a couple of cigar shops. Me and my treasurer went to 3 cigar shops and a vape shop last week, and I was in another vape shop today. And the cigar guys had pulled all their custom leaf brands, and they're saying, well, the vaping guys are number 1 right now. And absolutely, that's true. But as soon as they're done killing the vaping industry, you're next. You are absolutely next. And my treasurer, he's not a vapor. Every shop we went to, he pulled out another $20 bill for 1 cigar. And then we went to the next shop, another $20 bill for 1 cigar. That's Joe's habit. So he is not happy to know that his habit's the next one on the list. So, what do we got to do legislatively on this? First off, I'm in a unique position that the woman who currently owns this seat is probably pretty much public enemy number one for you guys. Not only do you need allies, we've got to get rid of your enemies. So uniquely speaking, help me get to Washington, get Marcy Captor out of there, and one of the loudest advocates for your destruction will be gone. So that's number one on it. Number two, how do we build allies? Well, conveniently, I'm also in a neat position here. And there was a little event in Cleveland the middle of July that you might have heard of called the RNC. Well, I happened to get this crazy idea during the RNC, or actually about 2 weeks before. I wish I'd thought of it 2 months before. That, hey, everybody who's running for office is coming to town. I should have a meeting of all the congressional challengers. It was hard, but I built a database of all the GOP challengers. I got about 206 people in the database at the moment. Because believe it or not, a bunch of the primaries aren't done. Yesterday was Alaska and Wyoming. They had primaries yesterday. Florida is on the 30th. So we're still marching our way down. But I had 15 aspiring members of Congress come to my meeting in Cleveland. And I had about another 45 on the phone. And I've probably spoken to live or emailed with about 150 of them. I have their ear. Now, that's not the same thing as to say I have them at my beck and call and they will do what I tell them to do. That is not the case. They're all independent candidates, they're running their own races. But I have their ear. I really do. I've got about 150 congressional candidates that will take my call, take my email, and want to know about issues to communicate with their future constituents as well. I'm in a position here where let's get these meetings going, let's get this stuff out there. I show traction out on the campaign trail here with it. That I vote, I vape, it's true. I can get this message to everybody else. I really can. And we can build allies on our way to November 8th. Because now here's the unfortunate part. Next session of Congress, I think it's sworn in on the 2nd of January. No, it must be the 12th of January. The truth is then the president gets inaugurated on the 21st. That starts the clock for the infamous first 100 days, right? In that first 100 days, that's when we've got to move. What happens on day 101? It's re-election time. That sounds horrible. That sounds absolutely terrible that they're only going to work for 100 days. But if you watch the news on anything resembling a regular basis, we got about 100 days from the middle of January to really get the ball rolling. Is it going to be passed? Is it going to be signed into law by the president in 100 days, whether it's Hillary or it's Trump? Almost guaranteed it won't. But it's got to be written. It's got to be through the Legislative Service Committee. It's got to be scheduled for hearings in the appropriate committee. We've got to have co-sponsors. If we aren't launched and have something really moving in the first 100 days of the 115th Congress, we're in big trouble. We really are. So we've got to move fast, and we've got to really have everything moving by the middle of March. That's the reality of the schedule here. And I know Scott's keeping me educated here. We actually have a meeting tomorrow morning. He said bring lots of notepads because he's just going to go at me for 2 solid hours on all the facts, figures, so that I can turn that into documents and help spread that out around the country. So that's where we're really standing. Mike has put together a basic flyer. Some of them are up on the table there. I know he's got some to give to you. So here's my big ask. Take them. Mike needs to give you a soft copy so you can print them. And every single one of your customer that walks into a shop, you need to start talking politics with them. It's uncomfortable. It's impersonal. You know, what did we all learn as a young adult when they got told about polite company? You're not supposed to talk about sex, politics, or religion, right?
At this point, everybody wants to talk about this.
You've got to. All through.
Yeah, everybody wants to talk about it.
Josh wants to talk about it. Well, you know what? If you can start lining them up with a sex conversation here and then squeeze into politics, I mean, work for Bill. It might work here too. There's no doubt. But you've got to talk politics with every single person you meet, even if they're not in the 9th Congressional District. Get them to talk to whoever's running in their district. Get them to throw support my direction, because when we do get to the 115th Congress, we were having the conversation with my friends from Toledo here. Shirley Ostroff is the candidate in Hawaii. I talk to Shirley every once in a while. Is anybody here offended if the woman living in Oahu votes your way?
No.
I didn't think so. You don't care if it's the next congressman from Hawaii who takes it over the top to win. And that's what you've got to tell your customers too. You know, if they're crossing the state, for you guys in Toledo, if they're crossing the state line from Michigan, because you know they work in Toledo, they live over there, but they buy from you, you gotta talk to them and you gotta make them vote when they get back to the other side on this issue too. They need to talk to their congressman on that side. You must. It's uncomfortable, but you must talk politics. And now this is uncomfortable for me, but you gotta tell them to vote for me, point blank. If they disagree on my low tax, pro growth, build a business platforms, on everything else, tell them to suck it up. Because this is absolutely. By the way, I'm willing to have those conversations with them on those other points if they really want to get into it. But the nitty gritty of it is, I guarantee you, my opponent wants it down. And I truly mean that. Not well regulated. We were having this conversation. Anybody here used to be a car nut, work on your own systems? Gee, when you were 19 years old, did you ever go to the exhaust shop that would like patch it from the muffler all the way to the tailpipe and maybe not put in a can? Nobody should admit to that. Too big of a grin here. But there's regulations where they come inspect to make sure you're doing the right thing. And maybe it's a pain. The infamous PITA, and yet it raises cost a little bit, and you should do it right. But they're not trying to put the muffler shop out of business.
Right.
They want you to do business exactly this way. And by the way, a business license is $65 a year. They're actually trying to put you out of. This is the horror story of horror stories. All that classic overreach that you always hear about. You know, this is the truth of the slippery slope. We've let it go, we've let it go, we've let it go, and now the regulations truly are designed to kill you and throw your customers to the wolves. And I can honestly tell you that just drives me up the wall. One of the examples I used in Milwaukee was, at that point it was like 3 weeks earlier, I was like, hey, did anybody see that crazy guy jump out of the airplane with no parachute and aim for the net?
Yeah.
They showed it live on television, 5-second delay. You know, he didn't hit the center of the net, but he just barely made it.
Yeah.
I do not recommend you do that. Never jump out of a perfectly good airplane. If you have to bail out of the airplane, bring a parachute. You shouldn't be aiming for the net. But if you want to, go ahead. Train well, practice, do what you can to hit the center of the net. It's not the government's job to tell you that this is so risky to you personally, you're not allowed to do it. And that slippery slope moves down. And my treasurer, Joe, knows his cigars on his list. There's a buddy I went to school with who's a custom foods guy here in Cleveland, specializes in local produce, local meats, artisan cheeses, artisan meats. If you're a food snob like I am, the old world hanging smoked salami that's been cured for an extra 120 days is worth an extra $10. After they've killed you, after they've killed the cigar shops, after they've killed the pipe shops, they've already killed the unpasteurized milk community out there, treating them as criminals. All that other stuff is next. So talk politics with your question. So, I've droned on like a politician. What are the questions from the room here, either for Scott or for me?
Let me address the customers in the store real quick.
Okay.
So,
Again, subject matter expert, bring me up to speed, please.
Right now is the perfect time to capitalize on the consumer interest, right? Because everybody's walking in, they're like, well, I can't have free samples anymore. I can't, how come I can't buy 1 coil? I gotta buy 5. How come you can't build me a new coil? Whatever the question may be. Now's the time to capitalize on that. Give them just a quick primer about the FDA. I can't because the FDA regulations, blah, 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 whatever your talk track is, and then throw a flyer. Throw a Donald Larson flyer at them and say, this is one of the guys who's running through office that can help us with this, so that you can go back to having free tasting samples. So
we have an advocacy and activism take. We've actually sent over 160 letters, physical letters that we collected from the customers. We stamped them and mailed them to Marcy. I don't believe that there's been a single response to any of them.
No.
There won't be.
Have you ever tried to call the FDA and get option 5? Have you ever done that?
No. I told you absolutely nowhere.
But now's the time to capitalize on the consumer having an interest, because in a few months they won't. They'll just accept it. That's the way it is. Right now, if they were consumers before and they knew how it used to be, and something changed change, you tell them, you pass out some information. Now's the time, because in 2-3 months, it's old news. They're not interested.
Still
Right,
fresh in
right.
their
They're
head.
used to
Right.
it. Now that's the new normal. We don't want that to become the new normal. We want the new normal to be the old normal.
Amen.
There's nothing wrong with the old normal as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Got a lot of people who stop smoking
Gotta
at the
get
end
where
of
they
the day.
don't settle.
The sign in my shop reads, if you are annoyed with this new regulation, please call the FDA, and I have the number on there. Option 5.
Yeah.
And
that's
please
perfect.
tell them your opinion of their regulations.
And you know, it's not a bad thing, but I would say it's a useless thing.
It is
Because
useless
the
because,
FDA doesn't care.
you know what's happening is you hit the option 5 and nothing happens. And then if you call back like 3 or 4 times and finally get through, and then you get a voicemail message, we will call you back. Well, I've waited 8 days now, still haven't had a call back.
Well, don't expect it anytime. You might be in a couple weeks. And if you ask them a question, your answer is going to be wildly vague and general. At best. At best, it's going to be wildly vague. Yeah, it's just.
But still, if they
if
get
they don't just refer
inundated,
you
I'm thinking, you know what, I'm thinking if they get inundated
Refer to
with
the
calls,
website, right?
maybe they'll start rethinking.
Not a chance, because
Wow.
they're not responsible to public opinion. There's nothing that you can do directly to the FDA as members of the public that the FDA will care about. That is not true for members of Congress who are, after the first 100 days, going into the re-election cycle. You can threaten their employment. You cannot do that to the FDA. There is nothing you can do as a consumer that is of any impact to the FDA. Zero, zilch, zip, none. They do not care. There's no way for them to move on. It will not happen. It is only your elected officials who fear the inundation of the wrath of the voters, because they could become unemployed.
So basically, we need to just basically attack it on the state level and kind of.
Well, it's a federal issue.
Well, I mean, federal as well, but I mean, for, like how she has her poster up, you know, trying to prompt them, obviously.
Oh, prompt them, absolutely, but get them to follow me on Facebook, follow Duncan Hunter on Facebook, follow Cole on Facebook. Send all of us messages of support. Send them to the website, tell them to send $20 so that we can afford to get another letter campaign out.
Right.
That is how you actually move this, is it's on the legislative side. And be part of the coalition, is the second piece on it, but the FDA doesn't care about you directly. They will care about what a judge says. If the judge throws down an injunction and says this is suspended for 6 months, 9 months, a year and a half, they will appeal, but the judge is unlikely to stay their ruling and let the FDA have their way. It only holds it, but that gives us time in Congress to do it. It is those two pieces. Just complaining directly at them is not going to turn anything.
The only thing is if we have a significant number of lawmakers on our side, period. But frankly,
got to get
ideally,
the
what we
hours.
need is vaping included in the platform, the vaping plan included in something.
Right, it's too late for that, but that would be
Right,
nice.
but
And
yeah.
eventually,
I mean,
it will get there.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, is that's what we need to move forward.
What I was telling John, it was in Milwaukee, is, you know, you've got 9 million vapors in the U.S. How many of those vapors, probably 1 million of them are enthusiasts. Those are the ones that, you know, they're running rebuild. The other 8 million they're smoking the N-Joys, which is a fine product, and no disrespect to them. They're not smoking anymore, so we should all be like, good job.
Right.
But those 8 million are impacted as well. All 9 million of these are impacted. So if they make the connection in my head, in their head, if they make the connection in their head to say, I stopped smoking because of this product, right? How many of those 9 million tried patches, tried gums, tried champions? Probably a lot. And tried cold turkey. They tried the approved cessation methods. So that got me off, the e-cigarettes got me off of smoking where these other things didn't. And now they're trying to take it away from me. Well, now you have 9 million people is quite a voting bloc.
Right.
Make them all vote.
Yes.
Besides telling them, you got to get them to a promise that they will vote. Every single one of them's got to go to the polls. Every single one of them's got to go to the polls.
You know, we
have to have
push,
voter turnout.
we have
Okay, so-
voter registrations at the shop with
Yep.
envelopes laying out, and we push, push,
Yeah,
push.
yep.
Yep.
But they need to be encouraged to push too. I mean, primarily,
Oh, yeah.
you know, you guys, you business owners, you're the ones that should be, you know,
Fire-
contributing to
fire
campaigns.
law.
You should be contributing to the legislation, the litigation. You that's an expensive endeavor. You should be donating to advocacy groups. You should be a member of advocacy. Who here is a member of OHUTA? Fantastic. All right, let's get you guys on board. But, and that's good for a state issue, but also you need a national organization. SPADA, VTA. CASA's a consumer. So if you're a consumer, you can join. You can join them as business owners, but ultimately they're a consumer. Consumer for Smoke-Free Alternatives Association, something like that. But they're a consumer group, so they're not going to go and lobby an agency for businesses. That's not what they do. They lobby on behalf of the consumers. But VTA, the Vaper Technology Association, SPADA, the Smoke-Free Alternatives Trade Association, you could support those two groups, vote one, whatever. That's your choice as business owners. The American Vaping Association, Greg Connolly does a lot. He flies all over the country and goes to municipal hearings, state hearings, hearings in DC. All of these groups need money. If you're an e-liquid manufacturer, join AIMSA, because we do a lot of that stuff too, but we have a very specific and narrow focus. And so we don't necessarily deal with tax issues and that. We're all about creating reasonable, realistic, and sustainable standards. We created those standards in 2012 to try to guide the FDA so that the doomsday didn't happen. And we saw they didn't listen to us. After 5 meetings at FDA, 2 meetings at OMB, which is the Office of Management and Budget, they didn't listen. But it doesn't mean we don't give up trying.
Right.
So, I encourage you, I almost beg you, you got to get not only yourselves in an advocacy group, but you also need to turn the customers on. The customers should know about CASA. The customers need to be involved. You guys have a very powerful voice as a business.
We actually have printouts in our shop that have like 6, 7 different advocacy groups.
Great.
Also
Fantastic.
local legislation people, everybody, Indian contact.
Then, but you have to also keep them interested. So if it's just a table and some stuff, that's great.
We talk
Every day, like you can record on me, it's every day, the same thing.
The vape industry has,
What I
As
do.
soon as they read my sign, they're instantly just.
Yeah,
But that's what we need them to do, is get pissed off so that they
And we're
start.
And then I have numbers for them to call, and I have websites, I have
This is
everything.
Just pass on.
So let me read you a quote here. So you guys might, I'm going to read you a quote, and then after the quote's over, just show of hands if you think who or where this quote may have came from. Okay. We have to ask ourselves some tough questions when it comes to dealing with the leading cause of preventable death, which is disproportionately cigarette use. What if we can safely transition currently addicted nicotine users to safer forms of nicotine delivery? If I were a pack-a-day smoker who was unable or unwilling to quit, and I substituted my cigarettes for e-cigarettes, there's no question I'd be significantly reducing my risk. Anybody just guesses?
I'm sorry, I missed the whole thing.
Okay, well, you get a participation star. So, who said that quote was Mitch Zeller? Does anybody know who Mitch Zeller is? He's the director of the FDA Center for Tobacco Products. He's the one responsible for the deeming regulation. He's the one responsible for the regulations. And he said, if I was a pack-a-day smoker, I would absolutely look at e-cigarettes for a reduced harm product, essentially. He's also said, cigarette smokers smoke for the nicotine, but they die from the tar. He knows that's not an e-cigarette. So this is a regulator who made that statement. And he's still trying to snuff us all out and run our batteries or whatever analogy you want to use, right? So
The vagueness of the entire thing is an indicator that this is designed to destroy us, not to regulate us.
yeah.
There are no clear
No,
answers coming out. There's responses to the very valid arguments.
My personal opinion is that that FDA either had political pressure, which I'm sure they did, and they also just gave up. They gave up trying to figure out how to regulate vapor products in a world where you have how many different devices that have how many different wattage settings on them, with how many different coils, and it's so easy for a user to to make a coil themselves, to make their own e-liquid. None of, it's not rocket science here. I think it's what dumbfounds all of us. It's not rocket science, but it took the community. It took small vendors. It took customer interaction. A user, on YouTube figured out how to wrap a coil. Guess what? Now, enter the big coil building. Boom. We used to publish some of our recipes online. Here's how you make peppermint patty. There's a recipe for peppermint patty. It's on YouTube. It's not rocket science.
And that's not going to go away.
That's not going to go away. We're not taking it down. But it's just, I forget where I was going with that, but yes. So I think, one, they had political pressure, and two, they just gave up. They gave up and said, let the courts figure it out. Here you go. Here you go, world. Let the courts figure it out. We're going to take this box that Congress specifically only wrote for cigarettes, roll your own, and smokeless. We're going to take this box that specifically only captures those products, and we're going to capture everybody else too. Nowhere in the congressional record, when they were discussing the Tobacco Control Act, were e-cigarettes mentioned a single time. Congress did not envision these products. These products were around then. They were around in 2008, 2009, when they were working on the Tobacco Control Act. Congress never mentioned it. Nowhere in the congressional record does this exist. Cigars were around. They were mentioned, but not included. So just because somewhere in the huge Tobacco Control Act, it says something that the FDA also has regulatory, or they may deem products under the regulatory authority that is made or derived from tobacco, right? That doesn't mean nicotine. It doesn't mean, like this device. Last I checked, it's aluminum and steel. Probably some silicone in there somewhere, gold maybe. Right? This is, okay. I'll accept an argument, although I'm not going to accept their argument, that this has nicotine in it, therefore it can be regulated. Okay, but not as tobacco.
Right.
As something different, as a technology product, as a tobacco harm reduction product, as a modified risk tobacco product, which these don't qualify for.
Well, what about synthetic nicotine? What about herbal nicotine?
Same use.
There are
not exactly
other
sure what
nicotine products
nicotine
out
is,
there
because
that
nicotine
are not derived
you
from
can get,
tobacco.
so about 6% of the weight of the tobacco plant is nicotine, right? The next best source for nicotine, eggplant. It's about 3.5–4% by weight of eggplant is nicotine. You can get it from tomatoes. You can synthesize.
You can also get green peppers, peppers.
Well, any member of the nightshade family. I don't know if you can get
But
it.
there's also herbal nicotine.
I'm not exactly sure what herbal nicotine is, because tobacco is a plant, which is an herb, right?
Right.
I'm not sure what that is exactly, but.
It's a synthetic nicotine.
Okay, so synthetic nicotine, it doesn't matter. Even though it says specifically, it says in the plain language of the rule, made or derived from tobacco.
Right, well, they're still
Synthetic
claiming
is
it's
not.
still a tobacco
Right.
product.
And in fact, in the Child Nicotine Poison Prevention Act of 2015, which I don't think any of us really opposed, right? Let's use childproof caps, makes sense. But in that act, there's one sentence in there that says, basically, and this is all the FDA or the Congress could slip it into a huge omnibus bill, but I forget the exact wording, but it's essentially nicotine that's natural or artificial. It doesn't say from a tobacco product. It basically grabs all nicotine that has together.
All of it.
Now, that's not in the plain language of the Tobacco Control Act, but that doesn't mean that one line couldn't be inserted into some other bill and just reference the Tobacco Control Act. So that's not even a long-term solution. And I think the FDA has came out and said that
Yeah, they're
they
not
consider that.
recognizing. Yeah, it's still tobacco
Right.
product. Whether it's derived from tobacco or not.
So,
Hopefully we get a judge with some guts that will crack down on
And
that.
it's just
We haven't seen a
wrong.
good thing
That's
out of
so
the
wrong.
courts. So the real answer, delay it to the courts, repeal new legislation. It's that simple. That's hard. It really is.
We have to do it.
Yes, Mike, we have
We have
to
to
do it.
do it. I'm not gonna go back, I'm serious, guys. I mean, And the biggest problem, and I've heard you guys talk about it, getting your customers to understand and do it. We pass out those little papers, go sign the petition, sign this letter, okay, cool, yeah. And I know 80% of them just throw the thing away. How do we get them to understand it's the real deal? I mean, hopefully these new rules we have to go by has made it sink into some of them, but I mean, they look you right in the eyes, yeah, okay, no problem, and you know for sure they don't do it. So, anybody have any ideas of how you can make them or get a better response from your customers to make them sign up the petitions and the letters and all
Stay
that?
on point and repeat it over and over.
It has to be something we do in our shop.
You have to
I was gonna say,
stay-
it has to be something we do right then and there.
Keep the
That we
message
do in our
fast.
shop.
That,
Keep the
put
message
up.
passive, the closer we get to elections, ramp it up, whether couple days before elections, hit people hard.
Right.
Right.
I like that, make it where they have to do it.
But if you put an iPad in there and you have it set up and you physically sit there and have them do it right there in
Right,
the
when
shop
they do
with
it
you
right
and you
there
get it
in the
done.
shop,
I like that.
and they're,
Yeah.
actually signing up right then and there.
Yeah.
Then that's,
Yeah, that would be an alternative, which, I mean, we have extra pads in there that I've let customers get registered online and stuff to do it, so that would be an alternative for us to
Register,
do.
and then, I don't know what you're doing on your own marketing side, but you should know every one of your customers, you want a cell phone number to text them, and an email address. We'll set up a mail blast, and as soon as early voting starts, not November 7th, the day before the election, but when early voting starts 6 weeks before that, you start hitting everybody you've collected on.
Which is in 4 weeks.
Right.
yeah.
You gotta go vote, you gotta go vote. If you haven't voted, go vote now. Hey, don't wait till the 8th.
Right.
And by the way, any friends of yours that you've not brought into the shop, you take them to go vote too and tell them how to vote.
You can
So
also
we have an
have
extra
Don
discount
come
if
to
they
your
take
shop and talk to your
Well,
customers as
Yeah.
we're
well.
gonna go do one in Toledo,
Yeah,
Lisa's setting something up.
yeah, we talked to her already, so hopefully she can get up to
So,
Toledo.
hopefully within about 10 days, we're gonna be in Toledo.
And Don and I are gonna hit the campaign trail, we're gonna hit all these stores personally, one-on-one, and go in and sit there and talk to the customers, and talk to the store owners, you know, instead of email, texting, and all that stuff, so we're actually planning on doing that, so.
Well, but that's only first round. The end of it is I meet them once, hopefully get along great. I'm never gonna get a chance to hit them on the early voting. It's gotta be you telling them to go vote. And reminding them to go vote. 2 or 3 times in a row, you'll get them. You gotta touch them at least 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, because actually in my shop, I have a lot of blue worker collar, you know, they all work in Jeep and stuff, so they're wanting to vote, but they didn't know who to vote for. That's the problem. So now that I have
Well, see,
somewhere to
Until
vote
tonight, I had no desire to vote at all.
Well, and that's the way it was looking, it's like, well, there is no.
Mike's got a flyer.
I don't want, you know what, I don't want either
But
one
there's
of the
my
presidents.
business
I don't want either one of those.
And Mike's gonna get you soft
So I'm
copies.
thinking, I don't even want to freaking vote.
I hopefully you'll go through 100 and go through 100 and go through 100.
I don't care who you vote
We've
for,
got,
that's not none of my problem.
Marcy meeting.
It's this stuff.
It's the rest of the stuff, but if you have
It's
people
a small issue.
like me,
Yeah, and then,
I don't want to vote. I mean, I voted my whole life.
That paper, you guys can, please put your emails and names and
I
stuff.
have
I'm gonna
never
send you
not wanted to
digital
vote.
copies
Now
of
I
those
do
flyers,
not
so
want
you
to
can
vote
print them
because
out.
I don't want either one of those.
Whatever you-
plans
I'll
right
give you
now.
some here, I had the wrong date, so I'm fixing the date.
Pardon?
I thought it was the
No,
first
you're
Tuesday
fine,
of the
that's how
month,
it
so-
is though, it's, you got,
First
you
Tuesday
can't,
after
yeah,
Monday.
but, you know.